Welcome to this edition of the B2B Engagement Podcast. Today, we're focusing on how to unlock your leadership superpower. We're delighted and honored to be joined by JoDee George, the Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for the US and Canada Imaging at GE HealthCare. Welcome, JoDee.
It is so great to be here and get to see the voice behind the podcast, Gavin.
It's my pleasure, and we've been anticipating this for quite a long time. So I'm excited to talk to you because there's so many valuable insights that I know you have that are not going to help just the audience, but they're going to help me as well. So I was wondering if we could get started, but a little bit by just you summarizing how you came to this career, this remarkable career that you have, leadership in a variety of different ways in marketing, and where that started and how you grew up.
I grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, very much like the visual that probably creates in someone's mind. Red barn, white house, Holstein cows, Duroc hogs, Black Angus cattle. I grew up working for my family's business as well. I'm part of the third generation of my family that is auctioneering. Working together with my family hard every single day taught me a lot about grit and determination and was my launching pad into the career that I've built.
I'm sure people who didn't grow up on a farm have a vision in their mind. And many of us who did not, who grew up in a city, have that vision you painted. The other part of the vision is that it's hard work, and young people, children, get actively involved in the running of the farm and the business from a very young age. And do you find yourself thinking back to that sort of life as you're going through a day of perhaps frustrating meetings or whatever might be happening on a professional basis? Does it bring you comfort or give you lessons or strength as you think back to that time and how you grew up in that environment?
When I've had different successes throughout my career as a sales and marketing leader, I give a lot of that credit to the way that I was raised and my community and some of the values my parents taught me. I think that's probably the easy answer. The more nuanced one is that as I've grown my leadership scope, the way that I was raised and some things my parents shared with me, like my dad saying, never tell anyone you have hobbies. If they ask if you have hobbies, say, I work, and then I work harder. And don't carry a coffee cup around in the morning because people that work hard don't do that. I think it took me a little bit of time to realize that's a specific view of how farmers think. And I love them. And I love the way that I grew up. But being tough and never showing anyone your vulnerability or thinking it's all right to walk around with a cup of coffee in the morning as you really engage with people on a human level, it's taken some time for me to really think through the lessons my parents taught me, hold on to the good, and think maybe some of these are for a specific way to get through a hard day on the farm versus to lead in a corporate setting.
I'm wondering, is there some broader lesson? I took away that the lessons you learned are applied in the context in which they're given. And sometimes that context changes and the environment changes. So you have to be adaptable and flexible as you think about what's the core message there.
The other aspect of how I grew up from an auctioneering standpoint, I didn't realize for a long time that was the beginning of my business career. If anyone's been to an auction, or if you haven't, think of a garage sale. How you set out the goods that you want to be selling, how you attract the right bidders, because you need two people to have an auction, but they need to be ready to bid. How you counsel a family who is selling all of their goods, maybe because a loved one has passed. And then how you make that profitable for the business that you're running. Those are all the elements that I call on today. And I just think that to be able to see that from an early age, it probably had a bigger impact than I ever realized. 20 years into my career, I do still think about how do you think about a portfolio? In some cases, in the way I thought as a 9, 10, 11-year-old, what should go on this card table and what has my father shared with me about how you look to your bidders to make sure that you're creating enough demand for the supply you have. He never would have used those terms. I understood the fundamentals enough now that I have gone back and have some additional degrees in economics and business. I can apply the fancy words, But those are the same concepts I learned growing up.
Yeah, there's some core truths there. Some of the things you mentioned when you talk about a portfolio, but also being able to understand value in the context of the audience or the potential buyers or users. Value is not universal. Being able to recognize who your audience is, who your potential buyers are, and then how to figure out what they value. The other interesting thing about that background is you started out dealing with the farm and working the land and the animals, but also a tremendous interaction with people in the auction business.
Mm-hmm.
And so that understanding of how to work with people has probably been something that when you start that young, and you have to engage with people that aren't your family and people you're not that familiar with. That helps bring some confidence to your personality as well and gives you some strength in dealing with new situations and new people.
This is one of the things that I've found in listening to your past episodes as well. The way that you think through just the little bit that I've shared is also in a way that I haven't thought about it before. Seeing consumers in front of me as a child was probably the start of a consumer marketing career, because it's such a unique opportunity, especially in business these days, to physically see every day in the summer. I still went to school. I want to make sure everyone understands that. But to be able to see your actual consumers in front of you every day and their facial expressions, not through research and all of the insights from amazing market research teams, but to really see how they interact with a product and when their face lights up, even if they didn't mean for it to light up, because we know sometimes consumers and buyers don't really want to show their interests, especially when they're in negotiation.
I think it's illuminating for us to think about how to start from the basics, the fundamentals. We do get a lot of market research, a lot of industry analysis, but ultimately the fundamentals are at the time that people make decisions. Those are the things that matter to them. And not to say that other analysis and technology doesn't matter, it does, but ultimately building a connection with people. And one of the things that I see as a common thread is looking at what the value is to an audience, a market, a customer, a set of customers, and then finding ways to communicate that value or the issues around that value, depending on the circumstance. And I think that is probably one of the most misunderstood aspects of what marketing is by a lot of other executive leaders and other people in corporations who may be technical or they may have other backgrounds. They don't really understand the difficulty and importance of starting with the value we're delivering. What is the problem we solve? And then what value do we bring to whoever's making that decision, the users, the customers, in actually helping solve that problem? But it seems to me that you've started from that very important point in everything that you've done is how to understand the value, and then you'll go from there. Let's work on that.
I think that marketing and communications don't receive and don't position the functions in many cases for the true value and business value that they deliver. And I do think that early in my career, I had some unique opportunities, especially at agencies, because you're many times thrown in with a new piece of business, new leadership teams, and really got some exposure early in my career, probably before I should, quite honestly, with senior executives wrestling with what direction to take a business. That's a unique opportunity for communications people because you're in the room early, helping talk about what are the bullet points, what are the talking points, what are the tough questions we should prepare for. And what I found as I've grown my career, it's not enough just to know how you want to talk about something. You need to be able to think, okay, what's the follow through for what this means for the business, revenue, and the P&L? And how do you keep having that be a flywheel or a companion approach to your executive team, the direction they want to head, and the impact on your business? And I think if you have sales, marketing, and communication working together, understanding each other, understanding the nuances of the messaging, and then how they impact the business, companies can become unstoppable. You'll notice I didn't talk in that about the product teams, about what you're actually selling. That's not to signal, it's not important, but you'd be surprised at the things people would pay a lot of money for if positioned well and had a story. The product always has to be great, because you don't have integrity if you're doing a great job communicating, marketing, and selling something that's not actually great. So I do think it starts with what's the story you want to share. Make sure you can back it up, but also make sure you can sell it. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity for communications leaders and marketing leaders to bring those functions together, but also be the right hand of a CEO, not just have a seat at the table, be driving what gets to that table.
I think there's a tremendous amount of truth in what you're talking about, in the disconnect that exists in a lot of places today. If you think about a lot of companies, they start with a product and then they come to communications and marketing. Let's pitch this product, right? What are the audiences? What are the markets? What are the segments? What are the messages? Right? The right approach is to start with the audience or the various audiences, understand their challenges, look at the market and say, what are the opportunities? And then go and build the product and say, now we're going to bring this product to actually deliver a unique solution, or at least a differentiated solution with these value stories. Then you don't have to invent the value story. The story started there. Great companies start before they build new products. They start by writing the press releases and communications as if it were already there. They say, here's the message we're going to give, and now let's promulgate this around our executive team. Do we really buy into this? Is this going to deliver? And they say, yep, that's where we want to go, or no, it isn't. If it is, then they go off and do the acquisition, build the product, or get the funding to do the work. I think that's a fundamentally marketing-driven approach. Let's find the problem. Let's find the differentiated value. Let's do the work to bring that to the market. And then the communications part is not necessarily easy, but at least it's well defined.
I agree with everything that we're saying. We're probably both thinking of Amazon when we're talking about that communications first perspective. I've had the chance to launch some great products that were discoveries by happenstance. Several years ago, I helped launch a corn trait, a GMO corn trait that had tremendous benefit in solving challenges for farmers that created, at this point today, it would be multiple $billion of lost corn yield and quality. But it was a collection of 7 or 8 different insects. By each individual insect, it wasn't enough damage. But the discovery for this corn trait was because one of the scientists left milk in their cabin from 1 week and then didn't come back until a couple weeks later. For some reason, the mold that grew in that milk, the scientists decided to go back and test it. And that's how they found the string and the initial discovery of what became this corn trait that helped solve multi-billion dollars of lost corn yield. That's an example that's different than what we were just speaking about. Instead of just launching corn trait, we had 2 things by bringing marketing and communications to the table early on. One was, what is the interesting, unique story of the discovery there? And how do you make that human? Because haven't we all forgotten something in our refrigerator at some point? And then 2, how do you make it meaningful to the customer base that you want to develop the relationship with? And if you can solve a secondary problem they weren't even aware of, we ended up calling it the multi-pest complex. And we added all the damage. And so I share that story because it's not always a nirvana of communications and marketing thinking what's the need with the executive team. But if you take a few extra minutes to think, what is the story we really want to be sharing and what are we solving? You can have the discovery to start with.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. I'm sure there are others like that, but not very frequent. And the fact that you had that experience is, I think, quite a boost to your portfolio in terms of your experience as well.
Later on with this amazing trait, we almost shut down corn trade between the US and China. So that also gave me some great issues management and crisis management skills.
I think that there's a lot of external circumstances that are beyond your control, but also unpredictable. So that's part of that flexibility. And that's a quality I think you have mentioned in the past, which is a real desire to look at where you are. And now you're working in a very important but very complex medical diagnostic industry. And one of the things that I think must be true of you is that you are adaptable, that you know how to change. Is that something that you are conscious of? It's an important element if you're thinking about where you are in your career and your life, or is it just an inherent part of your nature and it's just how things are?
I want to be able to tell you it's planned, but I think it's more inherent. I just find so many aspects of life, of business, of so many things truly fascinating. And after spending 20 years in food and agriculture, B2C and B2B, I really was fascinated to learn healthcare for all of its strengths, opportunities, and weaknesses. I've always been a business nerd. The opportunity to work for GE and understand the heritage of the company in such a dynamic, evolving industry doesn't get more fascinating than that. Many of these opportunities early in my career, as we've spoken about, have led me to this moment, thinking, how do we solve the distinct challenges that we have in providing health equity, health innovation? And the GE Healthcare brand promise is just something that drives so much passion in what I do every day in creating a world where healthcare has no limits. How can you not be excited about getting up and going to work when that's what you're trying to create and solve for?
Your passion obviously is shared by the whole company, but also by your intended audience or potential customers who can benefit from the work you and your colleagues are doing. I also believe that inherent quality has led you to this because one of the things you talked about was how you're fascinated by different things.
Yeah.
My perception is that growth and learning and adapting to new circumstances comes from one core trait in people, and that is curiosity. The manifestation of that is when you're curious about something, you ask a lot of questions. And when you ask a lot of questions, it makes you think. And then when you think, because you've learned something new and different, you ask yourself, if you're being authentic, that actually doesn't comport with something that I've done or believed, or maybe circumstances have changed. Maybe I should try something new. Authentic curiosity in people leads to continuous growth and authenticity. There's a lot of marketers and salespeople are often accused of being fake and they'll just say anything to get a deal. They're just putting this out there, but that's not true of the vast majority of people in marketing and sales. I think it's a perception that some small minority might have, but there is quite a difference between doing your job well and authentically having that belief in the way that you work and the interactions that you have with people and how that matters. And I know that a lot of people, everything they do matters. The way they communicate, the email they write, the way they show up. And that's a lot of people think of that as perfectionism. I don't necessarily think of it as striving for perfection as much as it is this notion of caring and respect for yourself and for others. But it starts with being authentic, because if you don't have that authenticity, then it doesn't matter.
I've had a lot of missteps when it comes to that journey. Probably about 10 years ago was when I really started to fail. Let me make sure I pronounce that correctly. Fail big. I didn't have enough humility because it is early in your career, you're taking small risks. And honestly, they usually work out. When things feel like you've got a really big deadline, a really big opportunity, big stressors, they truly are important, but it is a two-way door. You can make a choice, you can meet the deadline, you can miss the deadline, but you can usually go back through that door. And about 10 years ago, I got to the point where some of the decisions I was making were more like one-way doors. And what I think that taught me was when you go after the big piece of business or when you push really hard for something, you work too hard and don't bring your authentic self to your team. They fear you more than they love you. You can not be in it for the right reasons. I've had times where I pushed myself too hard and it had an impact on my family. I think it's those lessons that bring me to more authenticity and more humility today, because there was a time in my career where I hid that portion of myself because I thought leaders should be tough. They should slam their fists on the table when they wanted everybody to listen. And it's not me. When I don't act like me, I'm not as good at what I do. You probably don't want to work with me as much. And it's just not that fun. I really like to have fun. I come to this conversation today, and when we're talking about unlocking your leadership superpower, that is not a smooth journey if you're honest with yourself about it.
It's also hard to figure out what that superpower is, I think, for people. But it sounds to me like one of your superpowers is self-awareness, and that you have the ability to understand what's working and what isn't working for you. This, and particularly because a lot of times companies and industries define success in a particular way.
Mhm.
I don't know if this is true in your career, but it is defined in different ways for men and women in terms of how you show up and conduct yourself as a leader. That toughness your parents were trying to impart was to protect you, to say, look, you're going to encounter some things and you need to show up this way if it's going to work out for you. And what I think I'm hearing from you is that you can still be successful and you can still be tough, but there are ways of doing it that come from who you are. And as you said, it is you, as opposed to how other people expect it to be. And then if you do it that way, then even if it doesn't work out, at least that was you.
Yeah. And that's not something you should just automatically know. It's been a little bit for me to be all right with. If it's taken this long to figure out who I am and who I want to be as a leader, how could I have, couldn't I have cut 15 years off of this? But I don't think that's how it works. For anybody listening who's out there thinking, I was successful here and I wasn't successful here, it really is a journey. Everybody's trying to figure this out. If they don't look like it, it's just because they haven't figured out that there's something they need to be doing differently. I've seen a lot of different models of leaders over my years just because of the path that my career has taken. And it's helped me understand what I would like to amplify that's already in myself, and then try something else I've seen and realize that doesn't work for me. It either works for that other person or it's an undesirable characteristic, because no leaders are perfect. What I really like, though, and I see this and I think about this in my kids and kids that I see today, just my kids' friends and things like that, what my parents were able to give me a core belief that I'm good at what I do. I'm a good person. I'm a smart person, and not in a way that was over praising. There were no participation ribbons in my family, but my parents trusted me. I had a checking account very early in life. I was also buying and selling cattle, running a little bit of my own business. And so having a checking account and learning how to balance a checkbook early in life gives you a feeling of confidence and of responsibility. Even growing up, my dad would line up my friends at night after he made us popcorn and have us, not just me, but would teach my friends how to shake hands. It was firm and there were no easy passes. If you didn't pass muster, you had to get back in line. I now think, what would my daughter's friends do if I lined them up and made them learn how to shake hands? And I wonder, and I haven't ever asked my friends, what did they go home and tell their parents about sleepovers at JoDee George's house? There's something special in learning those types of skills early in life that I really wish every kid could have that opportunity. It strikes me now how odd, but also how amazingly beneficial some of those early lessons I had were.
Yeah, that's a really touching story. And maybe there's an experiment you can run. Don't tell your daughter you're going to do this. Just do it one day with her friends and see what happens. I would suggest that the lesson he was teaching was show up with confidence and believe in yourself. The handshake is just one manifestation of that. It's one way to show that you're confident and that you believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. You can do that a number of different ways. But for that moment and that time, young people learning to shake hands was important, and learning to show up with yourself standing straight and with that inner confidence was really important. And I still think that's important. The difference between showing up with confidence and being arrogant is arrogant. People don't learn very well and they don't change very much because they think they know better. But people who are confident and humble, they've learned those lessons, but they're humble enough and potentially curious enough to learn something new and change. So I'm going to share that important and wonderful story, not just on the podcast, but I will give you full credit.
I think we all have stories somewhat like that from our childhood. I've actually never thought of my stories as all that interesting. I like to tell them with a lot of energy, but at the core, I don't know. But I think everybody has experiences like that. And if I can understand that as a leader, as a marketing and sales leader, it helps me understand where they're coming from. And then also, when you think about the culture that you're building, that confidence and the opportunity that I had to learn how to shake hands, I assume that everybody had that confidence. Sharing my very high expectations. If you don't have that core of confidence, that's really hard to take. You don't know that it's coming from a position of love and of development versus fear building. And what I love are cultures that are open to debate and really work together and are all right admitting failure. And that's the culture I like to build, because that's where great ideas come from. Every brainstorm has terrible ideas at some point or another, but that is what gets you to the great ideas. And if you don't have people that have enough confidence to say not great things or stupid things, you can't be great. And it's my job as a leader and for all executives to figure out what's that person's backstory. What do they need in their values finding and on their journey? If I want my business to be successful, I need to get the most out of them for great work and great ideas that lead to more revenue and profit. I wish I could be interviewing you, Gavin, because I bet you have very similar, interesting values from your childhood that have shaped who you are today.
I think we all do. And I think the synergy comes when we get to the same values, but somehow those stories and the lessons that taught us those values are very different.
What we haven't talked about is training. And that's a function of my role today at GE HealthCare. And when I was at Carry Ingredients, that was my first sales training opportunity as we rolled out Challenger Sale. And I think that as a marketing leader, it is such a unique opportunity for me to have oversight and really think about what does it mean to arm my largest marketing channel with the right skills and competence in how you achieve this version of sales both you and I agree on. Because salespeople need support. And I say with utmost respect that they are my largest marketing channel. That's not to downplay the power of in-person interaction and what a brand promises and how you truly create trust, longevity, and increase total lifetime value of that relationship. And I believe that so many of those things, especially in today's world and in a company like GE Healthcare with nuanced, complicated products, it's really the implementation of that product. And if a salesperson isn't understanding the challenges and how to really uncover what a customer needs, that customer is never going to see the benefit from the amazing solution and portfolio that we have. I think even though we talked about sales and marketing communications not getting their due, training is also an unsung hero in corporate success. And I think that's missed a little bit.
I agree with you because I think most of the time training is focused on the product's features. Here are the key benefits for those features. Here's the things that differentiate it from its competitors. And there's a lot of them. Usually those are portfolio trainings. And by the time you're finished, salespeople don't remember it. And even if they did, it's the wrong position for them to be in. Instead of training on the customer's problem and training on the differentiated value of our solutions first, and then getting into the features later.
Sitting outside a gas station next to a Starbucks and counting the number of people that get gas and then go get Starbucks and taking that information from one day of possible lost sales to Starbucks, sharing that story when you go in to try and sell a new coffee system to that convenience store, to that gas station chain, versus all of the latte flavors that that beverage system can deliver. Not only is that a very important sales skill, but that also demonstrates passion and interest and curiosity in your customer's business because you were willing to sit in your car for 3 hours and count the number of people. That's also the fun part. If you're not always thinking, how do I position this? What is going to be the most interesting way that I can help my customer solve a problem that's core to their strategy and unlock via my portfolio? What's going to do that for them? Very often, the product comes at the end of that whole presentation.
So I would imagine that a lot of your job is in the mindset changing business for the sales team, because they wouldn't necessarily come to the table thinking, how can I help solve customers' problems? They might come to the table saying, what is this new product and what do I need to know about it?
I know a large portion of your listenership is CEOs. I think that's what CEOs should be thinking about today. We have so much technology at our fingertips, and there's so much power available that is all still delivered through humans. The amazing 3-year strategy that you've just completed and possibly even paid an external team a couple $1 million for is activated through your people. You need the right culture that is trusting, open, trusts you as a CEO, because maybe they know where you came from or the lessons you've learned. But we're asking right now, and I say this not just at JoDee HealthCare, but broadly in business, we are asking humans to trust corporate entities to adopt technology and sell technology that could be fear-inducing and anxiety-inducing. I think that more than ever, culture and training and mindset is going to be the difference between your company keeps growing or your company goes into neutral before it starts shrinking. And I think that's an uncomfortable thing for CEOs to think about and talk about because it's so soft and not overnight. It's striking to me that with all the advancements we've made, it still comes down to, do I trust you when I shake your hand? Do I think that you're in it for the right reasons? And I say that not just from a sales standpoint, but truly from a business founder and for CEOs. That's what would keep me up at night if I had a CEO behind my name.
I think you have a lot of effect, no matter what the title is behind your name, in every position. It's clear that your impact is felt dramatically across the organization internally, but I'm convinced in the market and by customers as well. I just wanted to thank you, JoDee, so much for taking the time and sharing so many personal stories and some of the lessons that you've learned through industry.
Thank you for having me think about my story in a different way. I'm going to need to talk to my 14-year-old after this because I feel like you've inflated my self-worth. And so I'm going to need her to just take it down a couple notches when she gets home from school today so I can keep that humility value rolling. But it's been a true pleasure chatting.